Summit for Democracy. We commend your leadership for hosting this summit. This summit is a call to all global leaders to recalibrate their resolve to bolster democracy worldwide, defend it against authoritarianism, fight corruption, and promote the respect for human rights. Botswana's democracy. Mr. President, from time immemorial, our forefathers have practiced this craft, passing it from generation to generation. Our democracy is founded on the following key principles: unity, consultation, humility, and the respect for the rule of law. Our democratic dispensation is centered around the Kotla system, which is our traditional Congress, so to speak, of consultation, which recognizes the value of everyone's opinion. Botswana's main theme as she participates in the summit will be celebrating democracy and enhancing its future sustainability. Our commitment to enriching democracy is anchored on socially inclusive national strategies reflecting the will of the people, their consent and participation, while focusing on long-term goals such as the following: combating corruption. Mr. President, the government of Botswana has prioritized the need to improve service delivery to drive our national development agenda, strengthen robust institutional frameworks that are transparent, accountable, and free from corruption. To this end, Botswana has passed a law on the declaration of assets and liabilities by the political leadership and senior civil servants, including those involved in the procurement of public goods and services. And to operationalize this law, the Ethics and Integrity Directorate has been established. We continue to ensure that oversight institutions such as the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime, the Auditor General, and Ombudsman are adequately resourced to enable them to conduct their affairs with acceptable levels of efficiency. Human rights. Mr. President, the need for nations to intensify efforts in making human rights a reality for all peoples across the world without discrimination, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, cannot be overemphasized. Botswana is ready to work with the democratic world to champion the promotion and protection of human rights. As we renew our call for democracy, Botswana will actively pursue the following collaborations with your esteemed country: hosting the National Democracy Institute Democracy Summit. We are committed to hosting the National Democracy Institute Summit in Gaborone in the first half of 2022, subject to the COVID-19 situation, under the theme Constitutionalism and Democratic Consolidation in Africa. Its objective is to promote dialogue on the consolidation of democracy in Africa. Collaboration between the University of Botswana and Presidential Precinct on Strengthening Democracy. The University of Botswana Department of Political and Administrative Studies is currently pursuing a partnership with the University of Virginia Presidential Precinct to strengthen democracy in Africa. The partnership is aimed at facilitating a collaborative agreement between the University of Botswana's Democracy Institute and the Presidential Precinct, including the University of Virginia College of William and Mary James Madison, Montpellier, James Monroe Highland, and William Schwartz Morven. Strengthen support for Democracy Works Foundation, Botswana. Through the Democracy Works Foundation Botswana Training Academy, which was launched in October 2021 as a partnership between the United States of America Embassy and the Independent Electoral Commission, training and mentorship support has been extended to women in politics to enhance their participation in national politics. In closing my remarks, Mr. President, I want to reassure you of my government's commitment to build a strong international coalition to defend the quality, integrity, and resilience of democracies around the globe. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Malawi.
Your Excellency, Mr. Joseph Biden Jr., President of the United States of America and host to this Summit for Democracy. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished guests and delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin with a question. What does the recent state of democracy in the foreign nations have in common? The United States in North America, France and Switzerland in Europe, South Africa and Egypt in Africa, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq in the Middle East, China and Myanmar in Asia. The answer to this question is found in a 2020 special report by Freedom House. That report revealed that in all these 10 countries, as well as 70 other countries around the world, democracy grew weaker during the COVID-19 pandemic. What is remarkable is that Freedom House reported that there was only one country on the entire planet whose democracy grew stronger during that period. That country is my country, Malawi. The reason for this has nothing to do with the size of our population, nor the strength of our economy and military, nor the length of time Malawi has been a democratic state. Strengthening democracy, even under adverse conditions, is about three things. First, having strong governance institutions carrying out their constitutional mandate when the situation demands it. Second, having political leaders use their platforms to engage citizens in actively holding those institutions accountable. And third, protecting the rights of citizens and enforcing consequences legally on those who violate them. To these ideals, Malawi remains committed and calls on all nations to follow suit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Namibia.
Mr. Joe Biden, President of the United States of America, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express appreciation to the government of the United States of America for having organized and inviting us to this summit for democracy. Namibia is a nation founded on the principles of democracy, rule of law, and justice for all. Since gaining independence, one of the most important priorities of the Namibian government has been the creation and establishment of an institutional framework necessary for democratic governance. Over the past 31 years, we have held 7 free and fair elections, and I am the 3rd democratically elected president of our country in this short space of time, serving my 2nd and final term. Our judiciary forms the bedrock of our governance architecture, and we view judicial independence as sacrosanct. The freedom of speech, the freedom of association, and the freedom of movement are enshrined in our Constitution. We are a nation absent of political prisoners, and our commitment to political, religious, and media freedom remains resolute. I have unequivocally expressed the irrevocable commitment of the Namibian government to media freedom by stating that as long as I am the president of the Namibian Republic, no journalist will be arrested or detained on the basis of their work. Testament to Namibia's commitment and practice in maintaining an excellent record of media freedom for the past 31 years, the World Press Freedom Index published by Reporters Without Borders ranks Namibia as number 1 in Africa, and this year, 24th globally with the freest media environment. I think we are beating some of the big countries too. In terms of the fight against corruption, Namibia has put in place effective measures and established independent institutions to fight corruption. Recently, and in addition to wide-ranging Prevention of Organized Crime Act 29 of 2004, a Whistleblowers Protection Act was promulgated to enhance our effectiveness in fighting corruption. All these efforts are driven by a clear national political will of zero tolerance towards corruption. Taking all of this into consideration, I wish to emphasize the fact that true democratic freedom is impossible to sustain in absence of economic equity. We therefore view economic inequality as a greater threat to national and global democracy. It is for this reason that we have prioritized poverty eradication, gender equality, and broad-based economic development as enablers of shared prosperity. Only by creating a more just and equitable society will we truly ensure that our democracy delivers for the needs of our people. Therefore, Namibia stands ready to hold hands with all the world's democracies to strengthen democracy and pull in one direction towards an inclusive, stable, peaceful, and prosperous future built on respect for the human rights and economic aspirations of all the citizens. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Ukraine.
Пані та панове, перш за все, дякую президенту Сполучених Штатів Джо Байдену за ініціативу щодо проведення цього саміту. Він присвячений боротьбі з корупцією, захисту прав людини та протидії від авторитаризму. Ці виклики сьогодні є ключовими для Європи та світу в цілому. Україна, як ніхто інший, готова долати їх. Панує думка, що незалежність, свобода, демократія для українців – це частина ДНК. І це не просто красива літературна фраза. А в цьому є велика доля правди, історичної правди. Бо ще 1000 років тому, коли у деяких країнах полювали на відьом і страчували тільки за думку, що земля кругла, в Київській Русі Україні успішно діяв механізм народовладдя під назвою «Віч». У ньому брала участь громада. І, до речі, задовго до того, як світ став підіймати питання гендерної рівності, у Віче брали участь жінки. Віче могло привести князя на престол або позбавити його правління, чому існує чимало прикладів. Не дивно, що 30 років тому наш народ у демократичний спосіб ухвалив рішення створити власну незалежну державу, коли 1 грудня 1991 року відбувся всеукраїнський референдум щодо незалежності України. Не дивно, що з тих пір Україна та її суспільство неодноразово захищали і готові надалі відстоювати цінності свободи та демократії. Україна, поза сумнівом та без жодної зайвої скромності, є лідером демократичних перетворень в регіоні. Ми створили нову інфраструктуру антикорупційних інституцій. Ми втілюємо інноваційні технології для запобігання та виявлення корупційних діянь, для прозорості управління державними фінансами, майном і публічними закупівлями. Ми ухвалили закон про деолігархізацію, завершуємо реформу децентралізації, відновлюємо механізм народовладдя, розбудовуємо інститути прямої демократії. Гарантовані захищені права людини – це основа успішної і прогресивної України. Тож ми надалі будемо боротись з порушенням прав будь-якої особи, де вона не була. Чи на тимчасово окупованих територіях Донбасу, або на анексованому Кримському, нашому українському півострові, анексованому Російською Федерацією, або всередині нашої держави. Ми робитимемо все для забезпечення гендерної рівності, захисту жінок, дітей, внутрішньо переміщених осіб, людей з інвалідністю та кожного, окремого громадянина. Зміцнення верховенства права та демократичних інститутів сьогодні залишається актуальним для всіх. Ми досягли суттєвого прогресу в розбудові власних демократичних інституцій і є надійним партнером для усіх, хто готовий сьогодні ставати на захист демократії і свободи у світі. Об'єднавшись, ми маємо зробити цей світ вільнішим, безпечнішим, демократичнішим. Наполегливо втілюємо це у життя і продовжимо це робити далі. Дякую.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of the European Council.
Dear President Biden, Excellencies, dear friends, no two democracies are the same. No matter where democracy has taken root on this planet, it's unique in its own way. But every democracy has many things in common. I would argue they have the most important thing in common. They give power to the people. And to do that, democracies rely on values: freedom, equality, human rights, rule of law. History has shown that these values must be nurtured, defended, fought for, with vigor and with passion every day. Today more than ever, our democracies and the lives of our citizens are defined by the digital transformation. This transformation presents both huge opportunities, but also risks for our democracies. We in Europe strive to place democratic values at the heart of our digital transformation, a transformation focused on people and their well-being. We believe this approach can be a global model for a free, secure, values-based internet. Dear friends, our digital future is bursting with possibilities beyond our imaginations. Global data is today's equivalent of yesterday's carbon, and it's why today we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. We must use this powerful new resource wisely and sustainably. As leaders, we must ensure this vast potential is harnessed for the good for our citizens, good for our societies, and good for our democracies. During the pandemic, we have witnessed the tremendous power of the internet to bring people together, to communicate, to share, and even to heal. The power to forge tight-knit communities in difficult times. And crucially, the internet also has the power to hold politicians and public institutions accountable. Citizens coming together online, speaking with one voice. This is no ordinary power. It's a special and unprecedented power. But like all new and powerful tools, our digital transformation also brings new challenges to our democracies. Cyber attacks can paralyze individuals, businesses, and governments. Increasingly sophisticated forms of information manipulation and interference have become more frequent and more destructive. They test our faith in facts and sow the seeds of doubt. Malign actors exploit digital technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. They infiltrate electoral campaigns and manipulate voter behavior, an increasingly worrying trend. And big tech has amassed enormous power, but not all have shown the willingness to accept the matching responsibility. Their market dominance and data control give them enormous influence over our democratic process. Faced with these challenges, I believe people want the same protection online as they have offline. EU citizens believe that our digital society should be based on our European values, inclusive societies that leave no one behind. We have a clear vision for a digitally transformed Europe by 2030, a transformation that puts people and our planet at the heart of our digital future. We want to be a global leader in promoting an open, interoperable, reliable, and secure internet. We want an internet underpinned by rules that protect our citizens. And we want to help our partners become freer and more democratic, because democracy and openness place the greatest freedom in the hands of people. In Europe, we are taking concrete action. Our Digital Services Act will bolster transparency, especially in advertising and the algorithm behind these digital services. It will enhance accountability, foster innovation, and protect people's fundamental rights online. And we are leading the way in regulating artificial intelligence. We want to support the development and uptake of safe and ethical artificial intelligence by both private and public actors. Artificial intelligence that respects fundamental rights without jeopardizing investment and innovation. This could also mean banning or curtailing certain AI practices that can negatively impact our values and fundamental freedoms. And we are equally working to strengthen people's digital literacy. Their democratic rights must be guaranteed online as offline. Today, cybersecurity is a top concern, especially for our open and free democracies. Cyber threats menace our security, our democracies, our economy, and even our personal lives. Cyber attacks often unfold on a large scale, so we must respond on a large scale. That's why we are working together to reinforce our ability to respond collectively. And we will also strengthen our cyber defense through our upcoming European Strategic Compass and through an ambitious EU-NATO cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy relies on trust, and trust is built on fairness, accountability, transparency, and rule of law. This Summit for Democracy is a moment to show that democracies, above all other models, are rising to today's challenges and delivering for our people. Today, that means making digitalization the engine of our prosperity and the social well-being of our people while protecting their fundamental democratic rights. I am convinced we have a unique opportunity in human history to rally our fellow democracies, emerging democracies, and non-democracies alike, and harness our collective energies in a spirit of inclusive democratic renewal for the well-being of our people, no matter where they live on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Nigeria.
Your Excellencies, heads of state and governments, I would like to begin by expressing my thanks to President Joe Biden and the government and people of the United States for hosting this summit to review the state of democracy today around the world. For us in Nigeria, we welcome the opportunity to set forth an affirmative agenda for democratic renewal in view of recent and current existential threats to democratic governance and the institutions. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, mindful that democracy is a process that must be nurtured, we are implementing good governance standards across all spheres of government. Fundamental to this effort is anti-corruption and efficient service delivery. As we count down to the 2023 general elections, we are creating the enabling environment and strengthening existing mechanisms to ensure that Nigeria records another peaceful transfer of power through free, fair, and transparent elections. May I reiterate that we are firmly committed to our Constitution and our electoral laws, and we will defend these laws to guide our attitude and conduct. Your Excellencies, despite the progress we have made, democratic institutions in Africa and beyond are facing growing threats characterized by military coups and manipulated constitutional amendments to elongate tenures. The relapse in multilateral cooperation is itself a major threat to democracy. I cannot, therefore, overemphasize the urgent need for stronger and mutual actions to common problems. Partner and developed democracies must avoid being breeding grounds for anti-government movements that threaten our nascent democracies. Mr. President, Nigeria's faith in upholding, promoting, and protecting democratic values and principles remain firm. We will continue to lead the way towards strong democratic values among the nations of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Guyana.
I remain a firm adherent of the proposition made by the great British Second World War leader, Winston Spencer Churchill, that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. We in Ghana should know, for we have tried virtually all the others. We've held elections that were not free and fair. We've had constitutional regimes without limitations placed upon executive power. We've had rule by law without rule of law. And we've lived under a number of military dictatorships. A month from today, 7th January 2022, will be exactly 29 years since the Constitution of the Fourth Republic of Ghana came into force. It has inspired the longest period of stable constitutional governance in our history. And I'm happy to state that a consensus has emerged in Ghana that the democratic form of governance is preferable and the benefits are showing. Ghana is rightly considered a beacon of democracy and stability in Africa, where respect for the principles of democratic accountability, human rights, and the rule of law have enabled us to oversee 8 presidential elections in the Fourth Republic, with 5 presidential transitions and 3 peaceful transfers of power through the ballot box from one party to another. We're determined to hold on to this status. Excellencies, the strength of any democracy is very much determined by the credibility of its electoral process and respect for the will of the people. We cannot overlook the fact that instability has followed many disputed elections in many parts of the African continent. That is why Ghana's Electoral Commission continues to work to ensure that all stakeholders in the electoral process, that is the citizenry, civil society, and political parties, do not have lingering questions about the legitimacy of an election. On the 2 occasions in which disputes have arisen over the results of elections, it was in the court and not on the streets that the matters were satisfactorily resolved. We're very much aware in Ghana that if we seek to prolong our democratic journey, we need to enhance transparency and accountability in our governance structures and build strong institutions that can fight corruption and the wanton dissipation of public funds. My government has undertaken arguably the boldest initiative since independence to reform and strengthen the capacity of our institutions to tackle corruption in the public sector, including the establishment of the Office of Special Prosecutor, an independent, non-partisan body with a relevant professional capability and exclusive mandate to investigate and prosecute acts of corruption. I assure you that Ghana will continue to improve on her electoral systems and processes. Out of duty towards our children and grandchildren, we will not give up when it comes to deepening our democracy, guaranteeing the integrity of the electoral process, and consolidating peace through the establishment of accurate electoral registers, the due validation of candidatures, material organization of ballots, and the proclamations of authentic results. Long live Ghanaian democracy and democracy around the world. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of São Tomé and Principe.
Excelentíssimos presidentes, caros chefes de governo. São Tomé e Príncipe é um Estado de direito democrático desde 1990 e há 31 anos que vem construindo e consolidando a sua democracia, este inestimável valor do mundo moderno através das eleições presidenciais, legislativas, regional e autárquicas, livres e transparentes, observando-se sempre uma alternância pacífica. Há precisamente 3 meses fui eleito o 5º Presidente da República numa das eleições mais disputadas da história da democracia, com um número recorde de 19 candidatos num universo de pouco mais de 123 mil eleitores. Não vi nisto a banalização do cargo ou do processo eleitoral, mas sim o dinamismo, a vitalidade de uma democracia que se enraiza cada vez mais na sociedade por um lado e por outro o fervor de um povo que acredita nos seus valores. Entendo que a democracia não se consolida apenas com a realização de eleições justas e livres que servem para escolher o líder que irá servir e representar o povo por um determinado período. Diz-nos a sabedoria popular que os homens passam, as instituições ficam. Num contexto de democracia plena, entendo que os homens passam e o primado da lei perdura, para além das instituições, pelo que é absolutamente necessário a efetiva implementação e cumprimento da Constituição e das demais leis. É neste sentido que elegi a reforma da Justiça como a principal prioridade da minha presidência, por entender que São Tomé e Príncipe deve permanecer inalteravelmente um Estado justo. Considero a democracia um bem público, pelo que ela é capaz de criar condições de libertação dos povos dos flagelos, como são a degradação do ambiente, os conflitos internacionais, a fome e a ignorância. E como um bem público, a democracia deve ter implícito o princípio da não exclusão, onde os progressos da humanidade devem ser partilhados de forma equitativa e sustentável por todos os seus membros, sendo que nenhum Estado deve ser deixado à sua sorte. A este propósito, há compromissos no plano internacional que gostaria de ver considerado nesta cimeira, iniciativas no plano nacional que entendo como exemplo a seguir na consolidação da democracia. No plano internacional, a reforma do sistema das Nações Unidas, particularmente do seu Conselho de Segurança, resgataria efetivamente um sentimento de justiça e democracia, provocando desta sorte uma desejável distensão internacional e melhoria nas relações entre os países e os blocos político-econômicos hoje prevalecentes. Seria igualmente desejável para a consolidação da democracia, como outro compromisso nesta cimeira, o estabelecimento de um mecanismo de persuasão que levasse os países mais ricos a cumprirem as metas livremente assumidas em matéria de ajuda ao desenvolvimento e em matéria de financiamento das ações climáticas. No plano nacional, gostaria de partilhar e realçar como iniciativa a aprovação da alteração da lei dos partidos políticos, que estabelece o princípio do equilíbrio do género, onde estes devem, na feitura das listas de participação para os órgãos do poder político em lugares elegíveis, observar este princípio, cabendo ao Tribunal Constitucional verificar que o mínimo de 30%, neste caso, de mulheres, se são propostas em lugares elegíveis nas listas partidárias. Acredito nos valores universais da democracia, pois creio que é em democracia que o ser humano melhor se realiza, quer individual, quer coletivamente. Estou convicto que as expectativas partilhadas nesta cimeira certamente contribuirão para o reforço da democracia ao nível global. Bem-aja a todos.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Cabo Verde.
Agradeço o convite do Presidente Biden para participar neste importante evento. É um privilégio e uma oportunidade para partilhar o posicionamento de Cabo Verde em relação à democracia. Com a Constituição de 1992, Cabo Verde fez uma opção clara por uma democracia liberal constitucional comprometida com os direitos individuais e com a liberdade e assente no primado da lei. Desde então, Cabo Verde tem experimentado campanhas políticas pacíficas, eleições e transferência de poder em todos os níveis de governação. Há um amplo consenso político e social de que a estabilidade e baixos riscos políticos e reputacionais são os principais ativos do país. Para além das leis e das instituições, existe nos cidadãos e na sociedade um sentimento de valorização positiva da democracia e das liberdades. Isto tem contribuído para que as eleições tenham sido realizadas com tranquilidade. A corrupção e seus tentáculos de captura do Estado pelo crime transnacional organizado não é tolerada em Cabo Verde e deve ser combatida de forma persistente. Temos, no entanto, a consciência de que nenhuma democracia é perfeita. Estamos integrados num mundo globalizado que nos influencia. Existem riscos e ameaças à democracia. Por isso é preciso proteger, cuidar e aprimorar a democracia com determinação e consistência. Cabo Verde é uma nação aberta ao mundo devido à sua história e à sua vasta diáspora. Tolerância, não discriminação e respeito pelos direitos humanos são os nossos princípios e valores partilhados. É guiados por esses princípios e valores que fazemos uma aposta forte de forma transversal da abordagem de género nas políticas públicas. Declaramos tolerância zero à violência baseada no género e abusos e exploração sexuais em crianças e adolescentes. E fomos o primeiro país africano a rubricar a Declaração de Coligação de Direitos Iguais para a proteção e defesa dos direitos humanos das pessoas LGBTI. O desafio do nosso tempo é proteger e consolidar a democracia neste contexto mundial complexo e multidimensional. É garantir a dignidade da pessoa humana através da eliminação da pobreza e da criação de oportunidades. E assegurar o direito ao planeta Terra habitável com qualidade através da ação climática. Cabo Verde está nesta luta por questões existenciais e pela ambição de desenvolvimento sustentável. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Argentina.
Buenas tardes. Quiero empezar por agradecer al gobierno del presidente Biden esta invitación a ser parte de esta cumbre por la democracia y los derechos humanos. Es también una oportunidad propicia para agradecer a la comunidad internacional que haya elegido a la Argentina por aclamación para que presida el Consejo de Derechos Humanos en la Organización de las Naciones Unidas. La democracia hoy vive un momento singular, signada por extremos, por posiciones extremistas. Su calidad institucional por momentos se debilita. Y eso es algo que debemos revisar y enfrentar con toda seriedad. Porque está visto que la democracia es el mejor mecanismo que existe para que los pueblos sean gobernados por quienes creen ser que son sus mejores representantes. En Latinoamérica estamos viviendo un proceso singular, donde en muchos países del continente van cambiando sus gobiernos y los procesos democráticos se van consolidando. Hemos vivido también un momento difícil. Hablo de Bolivia, nuestra querida república hermana. Bolivia ha padecido un golpe avalado por gran parte de la comunidad internacional y por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, y pudo recuperarse y recuperar la democracia, y hoy en día tiene vigencia plena la institucionalidad allí. Rescato esa realidad de Bolivia en este día donde la democracia nos convoca, porque tal vez Bolivia sea hoy un buen ejemplo de la importancia de la democracia. Democracia supone no intervención. La democracia es la mejor garante de la paz. La democracia no se impone ni con sanciones, ni se impone por la fuerza. La democracia es como la paz. No se exporta. La democracia tampoco se impone. La democracia es, por sobre todas las cosas, diálogo. Y ese diálogo hay que asumirlo en un ámbito de convivencia. Esa mejor convivencia se valida día a día. Trabajemos para que la democracia sea el mejor garante de la paz mundial. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Brazil.
Cumprimento o presidente Joe Biden pela iniciativa de organizar a Cúpula da Democracia. Esta é uma oportunidade para renovar, no mais alto nível, nosso compromisso comum com a defesa da democracia, o combate à corrupção e a proteção dos direitos humanos e das liberdades fundamentais. No Brasil, nossa Constituição Federal estabelece a dignidade humana e a democracia como princípios fundamentais da República. Temos trabalhado com determinação para forjar uma cultura de diálogo, liberdade e inclusão social. Estamos empenhados em assegurar as liberdades de pensamento, associação e expressão, inclusive na internet, algo essencial para o bom funcionamento de uma democracia saudável. Valorizamos o direito de todos de expressarem suas opiniões e de serem ouvidos. Nos últimos anos, trabalhamos com afinco na promoção e proteção dos direitos humanos no Brasil. Reafirmo nossa determinação de proteger e respeitar os direitos humanos e as liberdades fundamentais de todos os brasileiros, independentemente da origem, raça, sexo, cor, idade, religião, sem qualquer forma de discriminação. A proteção dos direitos humanos é valor inerente ao governo brasileiro e orientador de todas as nossas políticas públicas e programas sociais. A criação do Ministério da Mulher, da Família e dos Direitos Humanos é resultado desse compromisso. A luta contra a corrupção também constitui prioridade permanente. Tanto é que estamos completando 3 anos sem uma denúncia sequer contra nosso governo, ao contrário do que ocorria em anos anteriores. Adotamos o mais ambicioso e abrangente plano anticorrupção da história deste país e estamos construindo e fortalecendo mecanismos para prevenir, detectar e punir atos de fraude, corrupção e comportamento antiético. Reitero nosso compromisso de continuar promovendo uma administração pública transparente e responsável, mediante políticas transversais de integridade pública. Contem com o Brasil para contribuir para o fortalecimento da democracia no mundo, com pleno respeito à soberania e à independência das nações. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Chile.
Thank you, President Biden, for convening this summit and for inviting Chile to participate. Democracy is not just an abstract concept in Chile. For several years, it was the goal and the dream of an entire generation, which the Chilean society accomplished through pacific and representative means over 30 years ago. In Chile, we know that democracy and freedom can be like the air. When you have it, you take it for granted. But when you don't have it, you missed it, and you realize how important it is and how hard it can be to regain. During the last centuries, strengthening and protecting our democracies meant shielding them mostly from foreign threats or violent military coups. The last decades, however, have shown us that today the most recurrent threats to democracy come from within. Today, I will briefly address 2 of these threats. The first comes from governments that may have had a legitimate or even a democratic origin, but disavowing the constitutional limitations or attempting to change them in their favor, pretend to perpetuate themselves in power. This is particularly true in Latin America, where we have sadly witnessed the rise of regimes that began by implementing measures that eternalized them in power, and then moved to co-opt the organs that should work as a counterweight on their prerogatives, and inevitably end violating even the most basic liberties and human rights of their citizens that dare to oppose their views. 2 of the most important defenses against a fall in this spiral toward dictatorships are the free press and independent electoral organs. That's why keeping their autonomy, their independence, but also their prestige is key to preventing and confronting any totalitarian aspiration. The second inner threat is the use and the legitimation of violence as a political tool. As Isaac Asimov once wrote, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent, and democracy has no room for such incompetence. But often, what they lack in competence, they make it up for in determination and zeal. Disagreements are welcome in a democratic society, but they must be resolved peacefully and within the rule of law. At its core, all of our democratic institutions are legitimate dispute settlement mechanisms. But this mechanism can be fragile. Violence, or even the threat of violence, can interfere with the process, and we must remain vigilant of those who have more love for power than for democracy. For they will not hesitate to employ or justify the violence if it serves their goals. That is why today it is more important than ever, not only that we abstain from justifying political violence, but also that we, at our national levels, but also at the international one, stand ready and willing to denounce and condemn those who excuse or use violence as a means to impose their idea over the rest of society. We must stand ready to reveal their incompetence and inability to lead a free and just society, like the one we all aim to live in. Thank you again, President Biden, for providing us this opportunity to reflect on the importance of democracy. We must never take it for granted. And thank you for giving us this platform from which to renew our strong commitments to build better and more democratic society.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Paraguay.
Agradezco la amable invitación del presidente Joe Biden de darnos la oportunidad de debatir un tema trascendental para todos como es la democracia. Tener una democracia sólida es fundamental para el desarrollo de nuestros pueblos. Democracia es transparente. No menor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Brazil.
Cumprimento o presidente Joe Biden pela iniciativa de organizar a cúpula da democracia. Esta é uma oportunidade para renovar no mais alto nível nosso compromisso comum com a defesa da democracia, o combate à corrupção e a proteção dos direitos humanos e das liberdades fundamentais. No Brasil, nossa Constituição Federal estabelece a dignidade humana e a democracia como princípios fundamentais da República. Temos trabalhado com determinação para forjar uma cultura de diálogo, liberdade e inclusão social. Estamos empenhados em assegurar as liberdades de pensamento, associação e expressão, inclusive na internet, algo essencial para o bom funcionamento de uma democracia saudável. Valorizamos o direito de todos de expressarem suas opiniões e de serem ouvidos. Nos últimos anos, trabalhamos com afinco na promoção e proteção dos direitos humanos no Brasil. Reafirmo nossa determinação de proteger e respeitar os direitos humanos e as liberdades fundamentais de todos os brasileiros, independentemente da origem, raça, sexo, cor, idade, religião, sem qualquer forma de discriminação. A proteção dos direitos humanos é valor inerente ao governo brasileiro e orientador de todas as nossas políticas públicas e programas sociais. A criação do Ministério da Mulher, da Família e dos Direitos Humanos é resultado desse compromisso. A luta contra a corrupção também constitui prioridade permanente. Tanto é que estamos completando 3 anos sem uma denúncia sequer contra nosso governo, ao contrário do que ocorria em anos anteriores. Adotamos o mais ambicioso e abrangente plano anticorrupção da história deste país e estamos construindo e fortalecendo mecanismos para prevenir, detectar e punir atos de fraude, corrupção e comportamento antiético. Reitero o nosso compromisso de continuar promovendo uma administração pública transparente e responsável, mediante políticas transversais de integridade pública. Contem com o Brasil para contribuir para o fortalecimento da democracia no mundo, com pleno respeito à soberania e à independência das nações. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Chile.
Thank you, President Biden, for convening this summit and for inviting Chile to participate. Democracy is not just an abstract concept in Chile. For several years, it was the goal and the dream of an entire generation, which the Chilean society accomplished through pacific and representative means over 30 years ago. In Chile, we know that democracy and freedom can be like the air. When you have it, you take it for granted. But when you don't have it, you missed it, and you realize how important it is and how hard it can be to regain. During the last centuries, strengthening and protecting our democracies meant shielding them mostly from foreign threats or violent military coups. The last decades, however, have shown us that today the most recurrent threats to democracy come from within. Today, I will briefly address 2 of these threats. The first comes from governments that may have had a legitimate or even a democratic origin, but disavowing the constitutional limitations or attempting to change them in their favor, pretend to perpetuate themselves in power. This is particularly true in Latin America, where we have sadly witnessed the rise of regimes that began by implementing measures that eternalized them in power, and then moved to co-opt the organs that should work as a counterweight on their prerogatives, and inevitably end violating even the most basic liberties and human rights of their citizens that dare to oppose their views. 2 of the most important defenses against a fall in this spiral toward dictatorships are the free press and independent electoral organs. That's why keeping their autonomy, their independence, but also their prestige is key to preventing and confronting any totalitarian aspiration. The second inner threat is the use and the legitimation of violence as a political tool. As Isaac Asimov once wrote, violence is the last refuge of the incompetent, and democracy has no room for such incompetence. But often, what they lack in competence, they make it up for in determination and zeal. Disagreements are welcome in a democratic society, but they must be resolved peacefully and within the rule of law. At its core, all of our democratic institutions are legitimate dispute settlement mechanisms. But this mechanism can be fragile. Violence or even the threat of violence can interfere with the process, and we must remain vigilant of those who have more love for power than for democracy. For they will not hesitate to employ or justify the violence if it serves their goals. That is why today it is more important than ever, not only that we abstain from justifying political violence, but also that we, at our national levels, but also at the international one, stand ready and willing to denounce and condemn those who excuse or use violence as a means to impose their idea over the rest of society. We must stand ready to reveal their incompetence and inability to lead a free and just society, like the one we all aim to live in. Thank you again, President Biden, for providing us this opportunity to reflect on the importance of democracy. We must never take it for granted. And thank you for giving us this platform from which to renew our strong commitments to build better and more democratic society.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Paraguay.
Agradezco la amable invitación del presidente Joe Biden de darnos la oportunidad de debatir un tema trascendental para todos como es la democracia. Tener una democracia sólida es fundamental para el desarrollo de nuestros pueblos. Democracia es transparencia, compromiso, rendición de cuentas. Democracia es participación, es saber ganar y saber perder dentro de un Estado de derecho. Yo creo en la democracia entendida como un derecho humano colectivo al servicio de la verdad, representativa de lo social, la democracia como realización de la justicia, como garante de oportunidades para todos, con instituciones independientes y fortalecidas que permitan que nuestras sociedades, nuestros jóvenes, vean en la democracia la esperanza de su futuro. Y sin ninguna duda, su fundamento básico es la libertad. Sin embargo, llama la atención que estudios sobre el estado de la democracia reflejan que un 68% de la población mundial vive en regímenes políticos que concentran poder en una sola persona o élite. Estas cifras muestran una tendencia a la autocracia. Conociendo estas evidencias, debemos profundizar sobre el compromiso global de proteger a los países que sí defienden principios democráticos. También reflexionar por qué hay desconfianza ciudadana a la democracia. Los errores cometidos, la impunidad, que es reflejo de un poder judicial débil, la corrupción que se filtra como una humedad difícil de retirar en todos los poderes del Estado, son algunos de los problemas que enfrentamos en Latinoamérica y que acrecientan ese descontento. No es fácil la lucha por mantener el modelo democrático, pero tengo la certeza de que somos llamados a reconstruir esa confianza. Hay otro eje de reflexión. Vemos con preocupación cómo está aumentando la distancia ideológica. Hay grupos de derecha y de izquierda que cada vez son más radicales. Grupos que se ubican en diferentes extremos y terminan por no reconocerse como actores políticos. Esto es un factor de erosión para la democracia. Otro aspecto no menor, hay que analizar con mayor rigurosidad a la desinformación como herramienta de desestabilización democrática. Una noticia falsa puede convertirse en una verdad asumida en cuestión de minutos. Las llamadas fake news no son al azar, son diseñadas y coordinadas con una intención muy clara: desestabilizar, generar desesperanza, desencanto, y lo más alarmante es que muchos prefieren mantenerse en lo falso antes que buscar la verdad. Por eso, la libertad de expresión y el derecho de los ciudadanos a estar informados es algo que realmente debemos fortalecer. Agradezco esta invitación y ratifico el compromiso del pueblo paraguayo de fortalecer la democracia. Que Dios nos dé fuerza y discernimiento a cada uno de nosotros para poder tomar las mejores decisiones que puedan darle mayor felicidad y dignidad a nuestra gente. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Suriname.
President of the United States of America, Your Excellency, Joe Biden, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good day. Mr. President, Suriname applauds this summit as a significant step towards addressing democracy as a fundamental element for peace and security. Elections are an important, fundamental part of democracy. For a democracy in which citizens thrive, we must be assured that their voices are heard and that they are free from reprisals for the choices they make, especially within the realm of participatory democracy. In its national policy, the government of Suriname, elected in May 2020, gives a high priority to the principles of good governance, strong democracy, strong democratic institutions, the rule of law, and the guaranteeing and protection of human rights. Allow me to underline the importance of democracy as a fundamental element in the development of each country in which the existence and practice of the rule of law are guaranteed. The rule of law is one aspect which ensures that we know that the consequences of our actions are not arbitrary, but are prescribed by laws that we ideally have had some role in forming. The rule of law applies to everyone, even to those entrusted with official responsibilities by their peers in society. The rule of law underpins our democracy by guaranteeing that the government as well as the people are accountable under the law. The promotion of the rule of law also fundamentally requires a social contract among individuals, civil society, the media, the government, the police, and all other sectors of society to fight corruption. Corruption destroys democracy and the rule of law because it hinders accountability and transparency.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Uruguay.
Señor Presidente Biden, señores jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, agradezco la invitación para participar en esta cumbre de líderes que tiene como objetivo la promoción y defensa de la democracia, por lo que mucho nos agrada que podamos compartir con ustedes este espacio. Destacaré los principales ejes que están recibiendo prioridad en nuestra gestión. En la lucha contra la corrupción, el Gobierno del Uruguay impulsa un conjunto de grandes líneas estratégicas que contienen acciones firmes. Durante el año 2020 se dispuso a realizar una auditoría de gestión dentro del marco constitucional vigente que ha permitido identificar espacios de ineficiencia y eventuales irregularidades en el manejo de los recursos públicos. A ello se ha sumado la promoción de un Estado inteligente y transparente, dando impulso a la creación de una agencia de monitoreo y evaluación de las políticas públicas, vinculándolas con agencias ya existentes como la Auditoría Interna de la Nación y el Sistema Nacional de Inversión Pública. Hemos jerarquizado el portal de transparencia presupuestaria y el fortalecimiento del sistema de compras públicas, como simultáneamente asumimos compromisos vinculados a empresas públicas al servicio de la población. La corrupción sistematizada erosiona las bases de las instituciones democráticas de gobierno.
al facilitar la malversación de recursos que deben usarse legítimamente en el beneficio de los intereses generales del país, socavando la confianza ciudadana de la gestión de sus gobernantes. Pero la corrupción también impacta negativamente en las relaciones internacionales, ya que devalúa el nivel de interlocución con otros estados y organizaciones. En el año 2007, Uruguay suscribió, conjunto a Estados Unidos, el Acuerdo Marco sobre Comercio e Inversión, que busca promover la transparencia y eliminar la corrupción en el comercio y la inversión internacional. En la 9ª reunión del Consejo acordamos iniciar negociaciones para suscribir un protocolo anticorrupción como parte de la renovación del Acuerdo TIFA. Este y otros protocolos que ya se negocian constituirán un salto cualitativo en la relación bilateral con los Estados Unidos. En defensa de los derechos humanos y contra el autoritarismo, Uruguay respeta los preceptos constitucionales y posee una vocación democrática que va acompañada de la libertad individual. La defensa de los valores republicanos y democráticos son una constante en nuestro país y tiene como pilares fundamentales la separación de poderes y el respeto por los derechos humanos. Durante la actual coyuntura de la pandemia del COVID-19, el gobierno uruguayo ha conducido sus acciones a través del ejercicio de la libertad responsable. Libertad que está acompañada de la responsabilidad y de la solidaridad. El pueblo uruguayo demostró que con el uso de la libertad responsable fue posible atravesar un tramo importante de esta pandemia sin mayores contratiempos. En la actualidad, y sumado a los excelentes resultados del plan de vacunación en Uruguay, esta política ha demostrado ser acertada. En lo que hace a las elecciones libres, la celebración de elecciones nacionales, departamentales y municipales cada 5 años constituye para Uruguay una de las notas características de nuestro sistema democrático, instancias que son señaladas para la ciudadanía en su conjunto. La Corte Electoral, uno de los órganos más longevos de justicia electoral en el mundo, vela por la transparencia y las garantías de los procesos electorales, constituyendo el pilar de la justicia electoral. El papel que desempeña la sociedad civil en la democracia es vital. Por esa razón, el marco normativo en Uruguay favorece el registro y la actividad de organizaciones no gubernamentales, rasgo que promovemos también a nivel internacional a través de acciones que favorecen su participación. Como defensor del sistema democrático, Uruguay se opone a toda medida que de manera autoritaria limite el ejercicio de actividades de líderes, de oposición o defensores de derechos humanos. Uno de los postulados en las candidaturas del Uruguay al Consejo de Derechos Humanos es la de defender y garantizar la labor de los defensores de los derechos humanos y a quienes colaboran con los mecanismos del Consejo, oponiéndose a ataques contra su integridad física o desempeño laboral. Como hemos mencionado en anteriores oportunidades, Uruguay ve con preocupación lo que sucede en otros países, en lo que no hay democracia plena, no se respeta la separación de poderes y desde el poder se utiliza el aparato represor para callar las protestas, encarcelando opositores. Para avanzar en derechos humanos, el gobierno uruguayo defiende y promueve su protección en su mayor extensión, incluyendo cualquier abuso del territorio nacional y fuera de fronteras. Esta tarea, tal como la concebimos, debe permear toda la acción de gobierno, incluyendo, entre otras, a las políticas sociales, la política educativa, la política carcelaria y la política exterior, que se desarrolla a través de combate a la violencia en general y en particular contra mujeres, niñas, niños y adolescentes, así como toda otra forma de discriminación por motivos de género, raza, confesión religiosa, pertenencia política u orientación sexual, entre otras causas. Fortalecimiento de acciones que promuevan la igualdad de derechos y de oportunidades. Fortalecimiento de programas de apoyo a afrodescendientes, víctimas de delitos violentos, migrantes, refugiados, personas discapacitadas, en situación de calle, adultos mayores y todo otro grupo vulnerable que sea objeto de discriminación. Compromiso con la verdad y justicia respecto a las personas objeto de desaparición forzada. Saludamos y valoramos la decisión de la administración Biden de retomar los trabajos del Consejo de Derechos Humanos. Uruguay mantendrá su compromiso de liderar en nombre del Grupo Latinoamericano y del Caribe y conjuntamente con la Unión Europea, tanto en Nueva York como en Ginebra, la negociación y presentación de la resolución de los derechos del niño en Naciones Unidas. En todas estas áreas, el gobierno uruguayo se propone fortalecer las políticas públicas, mejorar el marco legislativo de todos los aspectos que resulten necesarios y ratificar las convenciones internacionales destinadas a elevar los estándares de protección. La convocatoria de una cumbre de líderes por la democracia constituye una instancia oportuna y propicia para que aquellos gobiernos que comparten los mismos valores respecto a la democracia, el Estado de Derecho y la protección de los derechos humanos renueven sus compromisos y expresen su vocación de honrarlos y de defenderlos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank President Biden for yet another initiative to facilitate global dialogue on crucial issues confronting our world community. At the outset, let me state that democracy is not sustainable without economic and social development, to which human and political rights are essential, but not sufficient. Global inequity and practices which perpetuate poverty, unemployment, and crime have contributed to weakening democracies and to the collapse of many of them. That is why, even as we all recommit to eradicating corruption, ending gerrymandering of electoral boundaries, halting arbitrary arrests, and preventing the repression of free speech, we should recognize that these conditions, while imperative, must be accompanied by concrete measures to deliver economic progress and social improvement. I am proud to say that in my country, free and fair elections are the norm. There are no political prisoners nor arbitrary arrests, and we run a vigorous anti-corruption program. We will maintain all of these now and in the years ahead. As we uphold these standards at home, so shall we stand up for them in the United Nations, the Organization of American States, and other international fora. Although the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have wrecked my country's tourism-dependent economy, depriving us of much-needed revenues, we have continued to fight crime relentlessly, provide for the vulnerable, and expanded our healthcare facilities. We have done so even as the Paris Club refuses to reschedule our bilateral debts during this challenging period of COVID. Yet, we remain a strong democratic nation, respectful of all rights and the rule of law. But the poor, the unemployed, the hungry, and those who are being displaced from their homelands as a result of climate change caused by others will not long remain peaceful and law-abiding. And political opportunists will take advantage of these conditions for narrow partisan gain, as we have seen occur in even the greatest democracies. For many of our countries that are fully committed to democracy, people empowerment, feeding the hungry, housing the displaced, and providing jobs to the unemployed are the biggest challenges to democracy. Small countries cannot meet these challenges alone. Other larger and richer states must help meet these challenges, or it will be not long before the deleterious effects end up on the shores of the rich, shaking the foundations of democracy globally. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Barbados.
The Honorable Joseph Biden, President of the United States of America, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen. Barbados has the third oldest legislature in the Americas, with an unbroken parliamentary tradition which dates back to 1639. Only the Virginia House of Burgesses and the Bermuda House of Assembly predates it. With the arrival of the British came their system of government, and thus it was that parliamentary representation that took solid root. One problem: it ensured that those of the landed gentry in Barbados and in the United Kingdom were able to enjoy the spoils provided off the backs of the enslaved Africans. So, my friends, regrettably, for the majority of our history, Parliament was an instrument of oppression rather than being a platform for the empowerment of our people. It was in 1937, with the popular rebellion which started in Golden Square, that we saw then the beginning of the modern political party system, and after, the formation of trades unions. The decision to allow women the right to vote in 1944, and all other Barbadian adults without a property qualification in 1950, it was then that we signaled the advent of the modern democratic state. These developments made it possible for us to do two major things. One, to claim our destiny as an independent nation in a matter of years in November 1966, and two, to pursue a development trajectory since then in the interests of the Barbadian people. For us, the building of a good society responsive to the needs of all of our people, especially the most vulnerable, has always been at the foundation of our understanding as to what constitutes a successful democracy. Today, representative democracy remains alive and well in Barbados, with free and fair elections as its bedrock. It is significant that I record this speech in the week during which Barbados has formally become a parliamentary republic. One of the key elements of this process has been the settlement and approval of the Charter of Barbados of 2021 that lays out very clearly the 5 articles to guide the behavior of our citizens in relating to each other, in pledging to each other, and indeed in engaging the rest of the world. Article 1 makes it clear that all Barbadians are born free and are equal in human dignity and rights, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, faith, class, cultural and educational background, ability, sex, gender, or sexual orientation. Of equal importance are the articles that speak to the need for active citizenship, namely those that impose a duty to care for each other and to reflect that each person has the right and duty to participate in the economic, political, and social life of our nation. This charter builds upon our strong tradition of free education up to tertiary level, universal health care, and a strong social welfare and social security safety net. This has led to us being recognized by the United Nations as one of the leading developing countries according to its UN Human Development Index. But my friends, this comes at a very high cost. Small island developing states like ours remain inherently vulnerable to all kinds of external and existential shocks, be they the climate crisis, the pandemic, global inflation, disruption of the global supply chains, just to mention a few. These constitute ever-present threats to our democracy. And what are the facts? We hardly make any contribution to carbon emissions. We are a victim of our success in that we are denied access to concessional financing even though we are not a developed nation. The international financial institutions remain reluctant to provide access to concessional funding on the basis of vulnerability as a relevant criterion. This puts us at risk of pauperization should one of those shocks to which I referred materialize. Indeed, we have seen it with a double-digit decline of our economy as a tourism and travel-dependent nation in the midst of this pandemic. Food and nutritional security now is as urgent to us today as it was during World War II, when our island was cut off in large measure from the rest of the world. These issues all stand to affect the quality of life of our people. For you must believe me when I say, there can be no true democracy without the development of our people. A people deprived of an economic or social existence will have no appetite for democratic ideals. They will not find it possible to protest the breach of human rights in the way that we would like. Countries with high levels of democracy can boast of higher human capital accumulation, lower inflation, lower levels of political instability, and lower levels of corruption, as well as higher economic freedom. Democracy, my friends, must be rooted in the elimination of poverty and the assurance of freedoms. And fundamentally, freedom is about one's right to choose, and hence it is inextricably linked to the elimination of poverty. We must never forget that democracy is not simply a monolithic institutional construct. It is about people. And this is why we must commit always to seeing each other, to hearing each other, and to caring for each other. If we can do this, then we can give breath to democracy each and every day.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Dominica.
Mr. President, Madam Vice President, colleague leaders, and friends in the fight for democracy, Dominica welcomes this summit. We count it as a signal of the recognition that democracy requires constant renewal and protection, as well as engagement at the domestic and international levels. This is the only way in which democratic processes, institutions, and societies can remain robust and relevant in a rapidly changing world. The threats to democracy have many guises, from drowning out the voice of the people, to the denial of opportunity, to the erection of barriers of social and economic inequity. Dominica's democracy rests on empowering our citizens, delivering opportunity, jobs, education, health, land ownership, and housing for all. In our country, we have enlarged the say of citizens in their governance through community-based processes, such as village and constituency councils. With the establishment of Wi-Fi to citizens island-wide and in all public spaces, we are ensuring that the democratization that is engendered by access to technology and information, together with the means to express opinions unfettered, is enjoyed by citizens across all socio-economic levels in our country. Dominica's democracy rests on multiple planks, which we are constantly reinforcing. To modernize and improve the electoral system, Dominica has established an Electoral Reform Commission, which is reviewing regional best practices, consulting widely with and obtaining the views of citizens and stakeholders, and will make appropriate recommendations. Dominica has a strong tradition of free and fair elections and the protection of human rights. And on the issue of corruption, of 180 countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, Dominica ranked 48. Being of mixed ethnicity, Dominicans know that no country can boast of being a democracy unless its institutions, policies, legal systems, and practices stamp out racial prejudice and institutionalized racism. As a proud member of the Caribbean community, Dominica stands in defense and in support of democracy in our region. We uphold the principles of the charters of the United Nations and the OAS and the principles of multilateralism, which respect the sovereignty of the state. Issues of governance and democracy must include multilateral relations. The world and the countries which comprise it have changed and continue to change. The member states which now make up the United Nations system are not the same which existed at the time that organization was formed. Hearing and respecting the voice and place of all the peoples of the world is central to modern democracy. It is therefore essential that there should be reform of the United Nations Security Council to reflect the modern world, and in particular, to create seats for Africa and small island developing states, which numerically
make up a substantial block of the UN's member states. Dominica is deeply conscious that democracy is a work in progress, requiring constant effort and perpetual vigilance. My country commits to continuing to strengthen all aspects of democracy, but in particular, to ensuring that equity, inclusion, justice, opportunity, and the freedom to make choices are core principles of democracy on which our country will remain rooted. Brothers and sisters, I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of the Dominican Republic.
En estos tiempos difíciles, cuando la democracia está siendo cuestionada en muchas partes del mundo como el mejor modelo de convivencia, el gobierno de la República Dominicana se enorgullece en reafirmar nuestra creencia en principios, el apoyo decidido a los valores democráticos y el apoyo a los derechos humanos. Nuestro país se ha convertido en una democracia estable y consolidada, con una economía de rápido crecimiento. Somos uno de los pocos estados que experimentaron una transición pacífica de poder durante la pandemia. Mi gobierno fue el resultado de una intensa, pero cívica movilización social que exigía una sociedad más justa e inclusiva, así como el fin de la impunidad. Afortunadamente, hemos recuperado la confianza institucional. Soy un fiel convencido de que una democracia no solo es un formalismo burocrático, sino que tiene que ser una democracia social, que represente los intereses de sus ciudadanos y ponga soluciones reales a sus problemas. Por ello, estamos plenamente comprometidos a llevar a cabo reformas profundas para fortalecer nuestras instituciones democráticas a fin de garantizar el bienestar de nuestro pueblo. Con la ayuda del gobierno de los Estados Unidos, estamos en el proceso de reformar las instituciones y las normas de contratación pública, crear una nueva ley de confiscación de activos, reformar la legislación sobre la trata de personas, así como llevar a cabo la mayor transformación de nuestra fuerza policial. Además, estamos comprometidos a hacer que el sistema de justicia sea verdaderamente independiente del poder político, especialmente la selección del Procurador General. También estamos comprometidos en modernizar nuestras leyes anticorrupción y a proporcionar al Poder Judicial las herramientas necesarias para frenar la impunidad. No hay democracia libre sin justicia independiente. Por último, me gustaría destacar que nuestro gobierno está consultando a las partes interesadas para la creación de nuestra primera plataforma de política de datos públicos abiertos. Somos conscientes de la amenaza que el tecnoautoritarismo y la vigilancia representan para una democracia abierta y libre. Apoyamos el ambicioso plan del presidente Biden de crear una alianza de tecnodemocracias para evitar el dominio de la tecnología global por parte de regímenes autoritarios. La alianza recientemente anunciada entre la República Dominicana, Costa Rica y Panamá reafirma el compromiso de nuestros gobiernos para fortalecer la cooperación regional, la estabilidad democrática y el crecimiento económico en nuestra región. Nuestra política exterior está dirigida a involucrar a todos los gobiernos democráticos para garantizar que juntos podamos trabajar hacia el éxito de la libertad y la justicia como un contrapeso del odio y la tiranía. La República Dominicana saluda la iniciativa de la administración Biden de promover esta cumbre de democracias. El bienestar y el progreso social incluyen el derecho a vivir en sociedades libres y abiertas. No hay meta más alta y más noble que mantener encendida la llama de la justicia, la llama de la libertad y la democracia de nuestros pueblos. Es nuestro deber, es nuestra responsabilidad histórica. No debemos fallar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Grenada.
Grenada, as a young but stable democracy, is very pleased to be associated with the first Summit for Democracy. Since 1984, Grenada has had a solid record of peaceful transition of power through the electoral process, with no confrontation or opposition to the results of that democratic process. Coming after a period of a revolution, Grenada therefore stands as a beacon, given the strength of our commitment to the principles of democracy and good governance. We are therefore honored to join like-minded nations in heeding President Biden's call to convene this important meeting, recognizing that no democracy is safe unless all democracies are protected. Grenada acknowledges the interdependent nature of our world and the fundamental importance of maintaining hemispheric stability and ensuring that our Caribbean region remains a zone of peace and a bastion for democracy. There are many challenges to keeping democracy sacred, but Grenada is uncompromising in its defense of our democratic ideals. Grenada places tremendous value on collaboration as part of the democratic process, and as such, we have established a social compact with various stakeholders, including the private sector and civil society. Grenada promotes the tenets of good governance, accountability and transparency, the rule of law and its enforcement, consensus building, equity and inclusiveness. We recognize the rights of every citizen and resident, and we uphold the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other core human rights instruments. In keeping with the goals of the Summit for Democracy, Grenada therefore commits to 1, facilitating greater exposure of young people to the parliamentary procedures through the Youth Parliament. 2, enhancing anti-corruption measures through widespread application of a national gift registry. Thirdly, implementing a gender-responsive approach to budgeting and a gender equality policy and action plan. We therefore pledge to deliver on all these commitments during the year of action as we look forward to the second part of the summit in 2022. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Guyana.
Your Excellency, President of the United States of America, President Joe Biden, heads of states, ministers of government, private sector officials, ladies and gentlemen, I extend great appreciation to President Biden for hosting this important flagship event on democracy. Democracy cannot be maintained nationally unless it is sustained internationally. The global chain of freedom is only as strong as its weakest link. Democratic enhancement and renewal, therefore, require a global effort, one that takes full account of the multidimensional aspects of democracy, including the provision of conditions for economic progress. Last year, Guyana witnessed an attempt to steal presidential and regional elections that delayed the declaration of a credible result for 5 long and agonizing months. Democracy was delayed and almost denied. It was only the vigilance of the Guyanese people, supported by a watchful international community, that prevented Guyana from being plunged into a dictatorship with all its disastrous consequences. This is why the government of Guyana is fully committed to strengthening the foundations and pillars of democracy to ensure that at all times in the future, the will of the electorate is upheld in free, fair, and transparent elections, and that the independence of the judiciary is maintained. We are aware that adherence to democracy and the rule of law must be aligned with economic and social progress in conditions of non-discrimination, equity, and equal opportunities. This is the course on which Guyana is now firmly embarked domestically. We have recently become an oil and gas producing nation. And after decades of being the second poorest nation in the Americas, we are in the cusp of an economic transformation. We are devoted to the ambition of empowering prosperity for every citizen of our country, and to achieving this within a framework of democracy. After our experience of the repressions of freedoms attempted last year, we are determined to build economic progress and social improvement on the foundation of respect for human and political rights and freedom of expression. And as we strengthen this foundation of democracy in Guyana, we will similarly champion them abroad. We give that undertaking, and we call on all nations to acknowledge that autocracy and dictatorships can become pandemics crossing borders and infecting political process across the globe, particularly infecting poor and vulnerable countries whose people have little to lose. That is why democracy must not be divorced from development. In the global community, each is dependent on the other. The summit must recognize that truth and act on it. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Mr. President, colleague heads, invitees all, when on September 19, 1983, St. Kitts and Nevis became a sovereign democratic federal state, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis asserted, among other precepts, their belief in the concept of true democracy. Obviously, the bedrock of a true democracy is securely grounded in the exercise of free and fair elections at specifically expressed regular intervals. The concept of free and fair elections is a fragile one, which must be zealously guarded by those with power to govern and vigorously monitored by the governed. The institutions of a participatory democracy are not self-sustaining, and consequently, they must be buttressed by the deliberate positioning of institutional safeguards. The strengthening of democracy is part of the bulwark against authoritarian rule, a commitment to eschew authoritarian rule, adhere to the separation of powers, maintain transparency, and an accountable electoral process are all imperatives for a democracy wedded to the rule of law. St. Kitts and Nevis, a relatively young sovereign state, is still in the process of strengthening its democracy. Parliamentary representatives are chosen every 5 years via the casting of secret ballots by all eligible voters 18 years and over. Any dissatisfaction which results may be adjudicated in a court of law. The court, of course, is one of the tripartite institutions, along with the executive and the legislature, which ensures separation of powers and prevents the foundations of democracy from being eroded. We remain committed to the Democratic Charter, which outlines measures to strengthen democracy in our hemisphere. Accountability and transparency guard against corruption and financial misconduct in public office. Happily, St. Kitts and Nevis is a shining example of the omnipresence of the Director of Audit, whose creation, duties, and powers are doubly entrenched in our Constitution. Like an alert sentinel, the Director of Audit is the constitutional watchdog against corruption. It is his or her duty to ensure that all monies appropriated by Parliament and disbursed have been rightly applied to the purpose for which they were appropriated, and that the expenditure conforms to the authority that governs it. The Director of Audit is not subject to the authority of any other person. This inoculates him or her from any interference, political or otherwise, in the conduct of the affairs of the office, which includes a yearly report to Parliament. The strengthening of democracy, defending against authoritarianism, and fighting corruption is a trilogy of ideals hinged on the respect for human rights and the dignity of human life. All three are grounded in an imperative that respects and recognizes that every life is imbued with intrinsic value. All who govern must ensure that the governed are empowered with every opportunity to maximize this intrinsic value and achieve self-actualization, the promise of a true participatory democracy. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia.
Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, it's a pleasure to meet in this virtual space with you and other leaders from many countries, representing a wide range of disciplines. I want to first of all thank President Joseph Biden for inviting my country to participate in the Summit for Democracy and for the opportunity offered me to deliver some brief remarks. President Abraham Lincoln put it aptly: democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people, and believe me when I say that is not a mere coincidence that my party campaigned on, now in government, is guided by the mandates putting people first. I will start by stating that the 5-month-old government administration, which I have the distinct privilege to lead, came into office with a democratic process of free and fair elections. On that important day, 26 July 2021, the people of St. Lucia exercised their constitutional rights and fulfilled their civic duty to elect a government of their choice from among competing political entities. I can also say that from universal adult suffrage in 1951, the St. Lucian people have consistently supported all the universal principles, beliefs, and values on which true and lasting democracy is anchored. My administration understands the natural inclination of people, irrespective of race, class, creed, or religion, to be free to live in peace, love, and dignity. It is our view that democracy is as much a psychological process as it is an economic or judicial process. People need to have choices, and they must be free to make their own decisions. We believe and have demonstrated by our conduct that the electoral framework should truly reflect the will of the people. We accept and support the enduring need for freedom of expression and therefore espouse the virtues of press freedom and the independence of the judiciary from any interference in the dispensation of justice. My administration strongly rejects corruption in all aspects of life, especially in the running of government. We abhor the abuse of power by those in authority, irrespective of political persuasion. In our contract with the people, we pledge to govern our country by the principles of inclusiveness, equity, strictly underpinned by the principles of good government. Our governance mantra, putting people first, is a pledge to the people of St. Lucia by my government to ensure that democracy will improve their quality of life and create an environment for the holistic development of all citizens, regardless of race, color, creed, or sexual orientation. The Governor of St. Lucia supports all efforts aimed at the promotion and protection of the rights of the citizens and remains committed to its obligations under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and related international conventions of which St. Lucia is a signatory. The Constitution of St. Lucia promotes and protects the human rights, non-discrimination, and fundamental freedoms of all persons and the preservation of the rule of law. It is our declared commitment to make significant changes to our statutes and to our Constitution to strengthen our democratic institutions, expand human rights, and to mitigate against future abuse of power by those who are so inclined to do so. We have signaled our clear intention to fight corruption by imposing strict measures to avoid conflict of interest in decision-making in public institutions. We welcome this summit and are happy to engage in dialogue with other countries on the themes for discussion. We believe that the goals of this summit are laudable. By coming together to discuss the many challenges that confront us, we are encouraged to undertake periodic initiatives to strengthen, deepen, and protect our democracy. Not only do we need to build on our democratic traditions, but we must be constantly vigilant to avoid erosion of the progress made thus far over the many years of building our democratic institutions. Democracy has become our cherished way of life, which cannot be replaced by any other system of governance. Mr. President, St. Lucia stands with the rest of the region in the promotion of democracy for the sustainable development of our economies. Democracy is the most effective and sustainable route to stability, recovery, and prosperity of any country. St. Lucia remains steadfast in its efforts in promoting peaceful, prosperous, and a democratic future. As I conclude, I want to assure this forum that the government of St. Lucia is committed to influencing and shaping the main priority areas of the broad field of democracy: a strengthened electoral framework, constitutional reforms, the judiciary, parliaments, political parties, and civil society actors, the role of the media, the political participation and representation of women, the engagement of youth, and measures aimed at addressing all forms of democratic inclusion. I wish this Summit for Democracy every possible success, and I thank you.
the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines welcomes the summoning and hosting by President Biden of this multinational summit for democracy. We support unequivocally the twin goals of the summit. First, to galvanize commitments and initiatives across the principal themes of strengthening democracy and defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. And secondly, to engage, listen, and speak honestly about the challenges facing democracy globally and within each participating country. We acknowledge that there is no perfect democracy. Thus, it is always in human civilization a work in progress. But on this subject, Abraham Lincoln got it right. And in simple language, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The founding fathers of our country's constitution in 1979 enjoined our people to affirm that our nation is founded on the belief in the supremacy of God and the freedom and dignity of man and woman, to desire that our society be so ordered as to express our recognition of the principles of democracy, free institutions, social justice, and equality before the law, to realize that the maintenance of human dignity presupposes the safeguarding of the right of privacy, of family life, of property, and the fostering of the just economic rewards for labor, and to desire that our Constitution enshrines these proclaimed freedoms, principles, and ideals. We live by these precepts, even though as human beings, in building an alive constitutionalism, institutions and practices, we sometimes fall short, though never irretrievably so. The contemporary challenges to democracy in our Caribbean include poverty and material privation, the threats of recolonization and hegemonic domination, the misuse and abuse of global information technologies, the weaknesses of certain critical democratic institutions of governance, the corrosive dangers of corruption, the rise of transnational and internal criminality, including violence against women, and in several countries in our hemisphere and elsewhere, the challenge of ethnic or racial discrimination. The correctives to these challenges suggest themselves. The question is this: do we have the political will to address them efficaciously? In tackling most of these challenges, practical multilateral partnerships are required. I'm hopeful that this summit will assist markedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, heads of government, it is my esteemed honor to be invited to join you this morning to participate in this summit to discuss democracy, a topic of enduring importance to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Caribbean community, CARICOM, considering the many national and global realities, including inequality, corruption, and inefficiency that challenge its very survival. On the 31st of August 1962, Trinidad and Tobago achieved independence. On that historic day, Dr. Eric Williams, our renowned scholar and first Prime Minister, elaborated on the meaning of democracy, the principal foundation on which our Twin Island state would be governed. He stressed that, and I quote, "Democracy means more than the right to vote. It includes the recognition of the rights of others and the responsibility of the government to protect its citizens, and the subordination of the right of any race to the overriding right of the human race," unquote. These core values to which we subscribe, at home and abroad, continue to steer the development of Trinidad and Tobago to ensure the inviolable freedoms of our people. Notably, our elections throughout the years have been recognized as transparent, free and fair, with peaceful transitions of government. There has been wide political participation by the citizenry, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech. Even amidst both traditional and contemporary challenges, the government of Trinidad and Tobago remains fully committed to observing and preserving the principles of democracy and the doctrine of the rule of law. At the CARICOM level, the democratic tradition is alive and thriving. Our region's key pillars of economic integration, foreign policy coordination, human and social development, and security are championed through CARICOM's consistent upholding of democracy in all its forms. This model of transparency and integrity allows CARICOM to act as a vehicle for diplomatic intervention in the region and beyond. We in CARICOM affirm the enduring values of dialogue, diplomacy, and the peaceful resolution of differences in helping to chart the way forward in our dynamic modern times. Mr. President, I am thankful that non-governmental organizations have been included in this summit, for their role in the democratic process must be underscored. In Trinidad and Tobago, it is the standard practice of the government to conduct public consultation with members of all interested parties prior to making changes to major public policies, and in particular, to those that affect the most vulnerable in our society. On the fight against corruption, Mr. President, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that a society free from corruption is a fundamental human right. As such, we have adopted an aggressive anti-corruption agenda, which includes strong anti-terrorism, anti-money laundering, and anti-white-collar criminal activities. Significant steps have been taken to prevent and eliminate corruption in both the public and private sectors. The government believes that transparency and accountability in government will promote integrity in public life, discourage corruption, and foster confidence in the stability of a democratic government. Towards this end, we have enacted the Integrity in Public Life Act and more recently, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Public Procurement Act, Explain Your Wealth Act, and the Disposal of Public Property Act. I recognize that we all lead sovereign nations with our respective democratic systems, which may sometimes diverge from each other and cause occasional friction. However, I believe that persistent engagement is essential to truly understanding and overcoming such differences. Further, if the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, it is that we are all connected and equally exposed. I am hopeful that the discussions over the next 2 days will yield further ideas in this regard. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to sincerely thank you for your meaningful engagement with the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and with CARICOM as a whole. We must all remain steadfast in our quest to uphold the fundamental tenets of democracy. We owe it to ourselves, and moreover, to the people who have put their trust in us to govern them. I therefore look forward to further exchanges of a productive and dynamic nature for the benefit of all people within our borders, our region, and worldwide. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas.
Mr. President and Your Excellencies, as home to the third oldest parliamentary democracy in the Western Hemisphere, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas applauds this initiative to take steps to strengthen democracy and human rights. The three broad themes of this summit embrace many of the initiatives which are already in place or underway in our country. In the fight against corruption, we are already compliant with the FATF regarding beneficial ownership of entities. We confirm that we have already implemented measures to enhance transparency on real estate ownership, and legislation is already in place to enforce bans on foreign bribery. We've also implemented legislation which transforms the public procurement process of the government, making it more transparent. Approximately 80 days ago, the Bahamian people elected my government with an overwhelming mandate. This was in part in reaction against the previous administration's decision to suspend crucial civil liberties for a period of 18 months and address the COVID-19 pandemic by a prolonged state of emergency under the rule of one man. We made the decision not to renew the state of emergency. Instead, we will follow constitutional norms and implement public health measures via more transparent and accountable legislation. In respect of rights and freedoms pertaining to the media, during the election campaign, we ourselves needed to seek redress from our well-established independent media regulator, which has been effective in maintaining open and fair access to the internet and other media. In opposition, we are also subject to exclusion by the state-owned broadcaster. We intend to remedy the latter ills. Regarding the third theme of the summit pertaining to human rights, I'm extremely proud to report that my parliamentary caucus not only has the highest number of women ever represented in Bahamian history, but we also have a female Speaker of the lower chamber, a female President of the Senate, and during my absence abroad last week, a female acting Prime Minister. Mr. President, today, under each of the three themes of the summit, my government once again commits to continuing and securing all of these important initiatives. But even as we fulfill our domestic agenda, we recognize that the historic roots of attack on democracy have been superseded. Tyranny can creep in not just via the bullet, but via misinformation, via false advertising, the fake profile, or both, all of which fracture trust within our societies. But the technology which enables this mischief sits outside of our jurisdiction, and so we are severely constrained in how we addressed it. And so I urge our friends in the host democracies of these technology giants to take appropriate steps to rein in these insidious threats which do so much to poison the discourse in all of our countries. As we approach 50 years as a fully independent, sovereign nation, on behalf of the government and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, thank you for the invitation to participate in this noble effort.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Canada.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. Pour assurer un avenir sécuritaire, stable et prospère à notre population, rien n'est plus important que de promouvoir et de protéger la démocratie. We live in a time of increasing instability, with growing authoritarianism and too many losing confidence in our democratic institutions. Democracy is not something we can take for granted. It requires constant renewal in order to face the challenges of our time. For each of us, that work starts at home. Au Canada, cela signifie qu'il faut veiller à ce que tout le monde soit inclus et se voit offrir une chance de réussir. Cela signifie qu'il faut agir pour promouvoir l'égalité des sexes, lutter contre le racisme systémique, continuer le chemin de la réconciliation avec les peuples autochtones et mettre fin à la persécution des groupes minoritaires, notamment les personnes LGBTQ2. Mais nous savons aussi qu'il faut faire passer notre démocratie à une nouvelle ère numérique. Nous devons veiller à ce que les droits dont nous profitons hors ligne s'appliquent également en ligne. Et c'est pourquoi nous avons créé une charte du numérique. Nous devons contrer cette montée de polarisation, de la haine et d'extrémisme, et nous devons nous défendre contre l'ingérence étrangère et la désinformation. C'est pourquoi nous mettons en œuvre notre plan pour protéger la démocratie canadienne. While democracy starts at home, building a safer and more prosperous world depends on all of us working together. Democracy, human rights, and the rule of law is a central element of Canada's foreign policy. We will create a new centre to better support democracy and good governance around the world. We will provide expanded, fast, and flexible support to fragile and emerging democracies. We will increase our support for international institutions that promote human rights and international law, including funding for the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights. And Canada will contribute to advancing our shared democratic ideals around the world, including through our leadership roles in the Freedom Online Coalition, the Media Freedom Coalition, and the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, as well as our work on arbitrary detention and the responsible use of AI. We cannot do this work alone, though. Canada will increase our efforts to provide safe haven to the human rights defenders, democracy activists, and journalists who risk their lives to uphold the principles we all hold dear. Mes amis, la promotion des valeurs démocratiques est essentielle si nous voulons bâtir un monde meilleur. Veillons à ce que nos démocraties soient profitables pour nos citoyens et restons solidaires dans la défense de nos principes. Merci.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Colombia.
La Cumbre Global por la Democracia es una oportunidad para afianzar los lazos del multilateralismo en el propósito de consolidar valores de manera conjunta que impidan su resquebrajamiento en nuestro continente. Los crímenes transnacionales, la corrupción, la violencia y el narcotráfico son algunas de las amenazas que la democracia enfrenta en la actualidad. Frente a ello, desde Colombia, nos hemos comprometido en impulsar todo el apoyo irrestricto a la Carta Democrática Interamericana de la Organización de los Estados Americanos. Asimismo, estamos apoyando la implementación de una base de datos internacional que incluye información de personas naturales y jurídicas que cometan actos de corrupción, permitiendo una mayor cooperación global en la lucha contra este flagelo. Por ello, apoyamos la introducción de un párrafo sobre este tema en la declaración de la Conferencia de los Estados parte de la Convención de las Naciones Unidas contra la Corrupción. Colombia es una democracia vibrante, un país con estabilidad institucional y con instituciones independientes. Tenemos un sistema político que aporta transparencia al gobierno y garantiza las libertades de los ciudadanos. Por ejemplo, estamos comprometidos con la participación de la juventud en el marco institucional del país, por lo que impulsamos un proceso sin precedentes en la región latinoamericana para que los jóvenes puedan elegir sus representantes en los consejos municipales de juventud. Agradezco al presidente de los Estados Unidos, Joseph Biden, por esta invitación a participar en esta cumbre global que se realiza en un momento crucial para la humanidad, en el que el mundo nos exige solidaridad y cooperación para lograr respuestas efectivas y eficaces contra las amenazas que se ciernen sobre el sistema democrático. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Ecuador.
Excelentísimo señor Joseph Biden, presidente de los Estados Unidos de América. Excelentísimos señores jefes de Estado presentes en este histórico encuentro. Hoy, bajo el gobierno que presido, puedo decirles que la democracia y con ella la esperanza han regresado a mi hermoso y multidiverso país, el Ecuador. Hoy la democracia retorna pletórica de optimismo y de fe, con pleno respeto a los derechos humanos, esforzándonos por construir y reconstruir la economía y combatir denodadamente la corrupción y la injusticia, y creando al mismo tiempo las condiciones que garanticen una nueva oportunidad de bienestar y progreso. Estamos culminando una exitosa campaña de vacunación contra el COVID-19 con la ayuda, debo subrayarlo, con agradecimiento, de la fraterna cooperación internacional. Y estamos empeñados en consolidar las reformas necesarias para atraer con la seguridad y las imprescindibles garantías la inversión interna y externa en orden a la consecución de un propósito fundamental: crear amplias y nuevas fuentes de trabajo y eliminar en la medida de lo posible, el desempleo y la informalidad. Somos un gobierno que ha dado muestras fehacientes de entrar con fuerza en el camino de las oportunidades y las libertades. Nuestro regreso al Centro Internacional de Arreglo de Diferencias Relativas a Inversiones, CIADI, lo demuestra. El respeto pleno a la libertad de expresión y a todas las garantías constitucionales también lo comprueba. Me place presentar ante este noble cónclave algunos de los compromisos que se propone cumplir este Ecuador del encuentro. Este Ecuador que aspira a estar más en el mundo y acoger más mundo en el Ecuador. Primero, la lucha contra la corrupción a través de una estrategia nacional que presentaremos en pocos meses. Asimismo, actualizaremos el Plan Nacional de Derechos Humanos y mediante un código de conducta, el momento en elaboración, nos proponemos erradicar la violencia contra la mujer y la explotación sexual de niñas, niños y adolescentes. Uno de los flagelos más dolorosos en la actualidad. Tercero, impulsamos una plataforma abierta y transparente con mecanismos adecuados de control en lo que atañe a la contratación pública. Y estamos empeñados en adecuadas reformas en los campos laboral y tributario en el camino ya mencionado de reconstruir y dinamizar la economía. Frente al doloroso éxodo nunca antes visto de los ciudadanos venezolanos que huyen de su patria atormentada, reiteramos el compromiso de un segundo proceso de regularización en nuestro territorio de aquellos hermanos migrantes. Señores presidentes, la democracia, la paz, la preservación del medio ambiente constituyen en esta encrucijada histórica ejes esenciales en la conducción de la economía y la política mundial. Pero para ello es necesario repensar con espíritu visionario la estructura de las relaciones internacionales, buscando atenuar las asimetrías y distorsiones existentes. Una misión central de nuestro tiempo es revertir las causas que están llevando a la humanidad a un posible desastre debido al cambio climático y a la contaminación ambiental. En Glasgow, mi gobierno puso un grano de arena importante al anunciar la extensión significativa de la zona de reserva marítima alrededor de las Islas Galápagos e impulsar, junto con Colombia, Costa Rica y Panamá, el corredor marino del Pacífico Este tropical. Debemos impedir con nuestra acción mancomunada que la realidad pospandémica nos conduzca a un mundo distópico y deshumanizado. Una leyenda indígena americana cuenta que cerca del amanecer los pájaros no cantan porque está cerca el advenimiento de un nuevo día, sino que cantan para que ese amanecer se haga realidad. En este sentido, tenemos que trabajar juntos en el ámbito de la comunidad internacional, defendiendo la democracia y las libertades, preservando la paz y juntando esfuerzos para asegurar el mejor de los futuros para nuestros pueblos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Mr. President, heads of state and heads of government, other distinguished participants, I thank President Biden for this timely initiative and for leading such an important discussion. Jamaica aspires to improve the lives of our citizens, protect their rights, and create conditions in which we can all strive for freedom, peace, and prosperity in a stable democracy. Jamaica is proud of our 76 years of universal adult suffrage and uninterrupted democratic election of governments. Democracy, however, is more than the mechanics of free elections. It is a commitment by the state to respect the will of the people every day. Democracy requires constant vigilance in maintaining and strengthening its institutions and principles. Our commitment to democracy is pursued with the inclusion and scrutiny of civil society and non-governmental organizations, as well as a free press. Like any other system of government, however, democracy's true test lies in its ability to effectively address the needs of the people. Democratic countries must therefore continually improve citizen security, increase access to education, health, and economic opportunities, reduce inequality, protect human and environmental rights and diversity, improve anti-corruption frameworks, and maintain the rule of law. Jamaica continues to work in each of these areas. As inequality and inequities are revealed and deepened by the pandemic, and as people demand more from constrained governments, the global community of democratic nations needs to actively promote a multilateral system that fosters fairness in trade, protects the planet, and guarantees the security and human rights of the people of the world. This will support the collective ability of governments to deliver and therefore support the preservation of democracy. Jamaica remains committed to playing its part both in preserving and advancing our democracy and increasing its momentum around the world. We look forward to working with our partners as we seek to learn from each other, to share and exchange experiences, and to commit to strengthening our democracy and promote democratic principles and ideals globally. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Panama.
Señoras y señores, reciban el saludo del pueblo y el gobierno de la República de Panamá. Nuestro gobierno está comprometido en mejorar las condiciones de vida de los ciudadanos, actuando con decisión, y en esa tarea es imprescindible la participación ciudadana como fundamento de la democracia. Por ello, convocamos a un diálogo nacional, el más importante de nuestra historia, cuyo proceso culminamos exitosamente el pasado 30 de noviembre. Esa consulta ciudadana permitió la participación de la población en un foro virtual, abierto, transparente e inclusivo, en el que todos podían aportar para la construcción de un mejor país en lo social, político, económico y ambiental. A través de ese diálogo, que llamamos Pacto del Bicentenario Cerrando Brechas, iniciamos la creación de una visión de país a mediano y largo plazo para impulsar transformaciones sociales que nos permitan reducir las causas estructurales de las desigualdades. Ese proceso reveló, entre otros temas, la necesidad de establecer políticas y reformas legales que contribuyan a la eficacia de los estamentos de seguridad y de las autoridades judiciales para contrarrestar las actividades de la delincuencia y el crimen organizado. En ese sentido, hemos presentado para discusión y aprobación la Ley de Extinción de Dominio, que nos permitirá penetrar el corazón financiero de los grupos del crimen organizado para privarlos del acceso a bienes ilícitamente adquiridos. Por otro lado, estamos reforzando el proceso de transparencia financiera a través de la puesta en funcionamiento del Sistema Único de Beneficiarios Finales de personas jurídicas, que facilitará el trabajo de inteligencia financiera, investigación y procesamiento judicial de las actividades relacionadas con el crimen organizado. Señoras y señores, nuestro país mantiene su compromiso de apoyar las acciones multilaterales para la conciliación y el diálogo alineados a los principios universales de paz y desarrollo sostenible para beneficio de nuestros ciudadanos y del mundo. La República de Panamá está comprometida con la defensa y fortalecimiento de la democracia, sus instituciones y el respeto a los derechos humanos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, the President of Peru.
Señor Presidente de los Estados Unidos de América, desde hace 2 años enfrentamos una pandemia que no tiene precedentes en la historia. Una crisis de grandes proporciones que no solo ha causado la muerte de millones de habitantes a lo largo y ancho del mundo, sino que ha tenido un impacto en la economía, en el comercio, en la educación y, cómo no, en la democracia y el estado de nuestras instituciones. En regiones como América Latina, esta pandemia ha agravado los problemas históricos, los problemas sociales, los problemas políticos y económicos, y ha afectado la legitimidad de las democracias. Los sistemas políticos y los aparatos administrativos no han logrado dar respuestas a la crisis ni a las crecientes demandas ciudadanas. Por ello, saludo la iniciativa del presidente de los Estados Unidos de convocarnos a reflexionar sobre los desafíos de la democracia. Tenemos que pasar de una democracia electoral a una democracia efectiva, que garantice los derechos a la salud, a la educación, al agua potable, a la igualdad de oportunidades, a la vivienda, al empleo, al trato digno. Ello implica combatir con mayor determinación la pobreza, la desigualdad y la exclusión, y profundizar la solidaridad internacional para hacer realidad un nuevo contrato social global, como nos han propuesto muchos compañeros, hermanos de diferentes países, y como nos ha propuesto también últimamente el secretario general de las Naciones Unidas, en concordancia con la Agenda 2030. Asimismo, es necesario avanzar hacia un sistema de salud más sólido y más inclusivo. Por ello, continuaremos abogando en los foros internacionales para que todos los países tengan acceso equitativo a diagnósticos, a terapias, medicamentos y vacunas, así como a los componentes que se requieren en la respuesta frente a la COVID-19. Los desafíos de la democracia también pasan por garantizar el Estado de Derecho, el equilibrio de poderes, la independencia de los sistemas de administración de justicia y las libertades de prensa y expresión. Seguiremos impulsando la lucha contra la corrupción, tanto en el ámbito global como hemisférico, para tener una respuesta conjunta que evite la impunidad, el lavado de activos y otras actividades dolosas. Tenemos la convicción de que la mayor defensa de la democracia es una ciudadanía cuyas demandas sean atendidas por un Estado honesto, eficiente y transparente. La pandemia no ha creado un problema nuevo, sino que ha acelerado muchos de los que ya existen. El mayor reto que tenemos es salir de esta crisis y construir una sociedad más justa, más equitativa, más desarrollada y más democrática. Muchas gracias.